scientists, researchers, etc. The SBSTA has entrusted the Adaptation Committee to provide advice to the Nairobi Work Program, which ensures that the Nairobi Work Program's knowledge to action mission and related outputs remain relevant and tailored to the needs of the parties. Speaking of knowledge to action, Navina will now look at what the AC has done to facilitate implementation.
Thank you very much. So we're moving to function number 4. Function number 4 is all about means to incentivize the implementation of adaptation action. This includes finance, technology, and capacity building. Here, the AC regularly agrees on elements of draft guidance to the GCF and the GEF. This is important because these elements are then sent once agreed to the SCF, and the SCF channels this to the COP. This is, of course, not the only effort that the AC undertakes when it comes to supporting developing countries in accessing adaptation funding. Only recently, we finalized a paper that discusses capacity gaps in accessing adaptation funding. This paper looks at different funding instruments and mechanisms, not only under the convention, but beyond. Navigating this landscape can be sometimes overwhelming. So for supporting the navigation of the landscape, we support developing countries in identifying different options of accessing funding. The AC is just now, as we speak, working on an interactive tool that will allow parties to have a good overview of the different sources of support that are currently available. At the same time, the AC is working on updating a report that was created in 2015 around this topic. On the specific topic of accessing GCF readiness program in supporting adaptation, the AC works closely with the GCF and all relevant stakeholder groups to make the access smoother and easier. The AC has conducted workshops around this and issued information papers to help identify the challenges and address the challenges associated with accessing funding. Lastly, I would like to mention the Adaptation Finance Bulletin. The AC issues this bulletin twice or 3 times a year, and it helps interested readers in having an overview of the new developments around adaptation funding. I'm pretty sure that most of you in the room already have access to that bulletin, but if you don't, please be encouraged and invited to sign up for the mailing list. Pilar, it seems like it's time for another question.
I have a lot of questions today. Well, with respect to the Adaptation Finance Bulletin already mentioned by Navina, we have a question for you today. This is, what year was the first Adaptation Finance Bulletin published? Was it 2015, Paris Agreement, year 2017, 2020, 2021? It seems to be fairly new, according to these answers. Is it? Again, our audience seems to be very wise, so the correct answer is 2017. So probably you are readers of this product of the Adaptation Committee, and we are very, very happy to acknowledge that. So thank you very much, Navina and Sheila, for your overview presentation. I think that you have another function to mention. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Pilar. So we are going to the last function. We don't want to miss this one, which is what the AC is doing to look at information provided by parties on their monitoring and review of adaptation actions, the support provided and received, as well as the possible needs and gaps and other information. The AC is discussing monitoring, evaluation, reviewing, and learning of adaptation action on all levels on an ongoing basis. As one example, the AC organized a meeting to exchange and share views on national adaptation indicators and how they relate to indicators or goals for sustainable development, and for disaster risk reduction. This was followed by an event earlier this year, which looked more closely at how impacts of adaptation sorry. This was followed by an event earlier this year which looked more closely at how impacts of adaptation interventions can be measured at the national, subnational level. Participants also discussed how monitoring and evaluation results can be best communicated so that consistent learning and improvement is ensured. Looking at the global level, the Adaptation Committee is working with the LEG and the Standing Committee on Finance, or the SCF, on methodologies to assess the adequacy and effectiveness of adaptation and support, which we anticipate will be helpful for parties in the context of the global stocktake. As a very last point, I would like to mention our technical paper on the global goal on adaptation, which has received much positive attention. It discusses approaches to reviewing the overall progress made in achieving the global goal on adaptation, and you may have seen last week that we issued it as an online publication. I encourage you to read this report in your free time. Now, back to Pilar to walk through some of our past work in more detail.
Thank you very much, Sheila, and thank you, Navina, for this insightful overview with respect to the functions of the Adaptation Committee. Now, we would like to examine a little bit more our favorites, deliverables of the AC during the last 5 years. We already know for the first part of the session today that we have 25 deliverables, so we have an opportunity to select some of them in order to make this presentation. And since we are celebrating today all the achievements of the AC during these 5 years and of course before, we would like to host a kind of, and a short of course, award ceremony where you will have the opportunity to be the judges and to vote which are your favorite products of the AC. In order to do that, we will have 3 AC members that will provide some ideas, some elevator pitches with respect to different products. And then they will provide arguments and will try to convince you that these products are the best. So after that, you will need to vote which are your favorite or preferable deliverables of the Adaptation Committee. So I would like to invite my colleagues, Alice, Mariam, and Funi, to please give us these elevator pitches with respect to the deliverables of the AC.
Thank you, Pilar, to be the first one. I hope I get more votes. So I'm going to be pitching to you guys on what both Sheila and Navina presented, which is on the various approaches to long-term adaptation planning. This is definitely a winner. It has everything that makes it a good product. It is concise, and it explains some of the key concepts very clearly, and it will leave you with enough information so you can venture on from there. What this paper is about and why we wrote it as Adaptation Committee. You will recall that since the Paris Agreement was adopted in 2015, countries are increasingly developing national adaptation plans and strategies. Therefore, this paper summarizes approaches to long-term adaptation planning. They range from ecosystem adaptation, community-based adaptation, to risk-based approaches, and countries can therefore use these approaches individually or in combination. Moreover, a long-term approach to adaptation can also help countries to better integrate adaptation into development planning, ensuring a coherent process that looks at all relevant sectors and at all levels, just like each individual country is required to do. Are you interested in the pros and cons of incremental versus transformational change? Well, do you want to know the difference? Can you dive straight into making long-term adaptation plan? And how does this relate to short and medium-term plans? Which approach is the best for your case? Or is it maybe a mix of the many approaches? And most importantly, what is long-term adaptation planning? Please kindly read the paper and find out more and vote for it.
You want the next one as well?
Yes.
So, thank you. I'm really thrilled to tell you about one of our best products yet and why you should vote for this as the best deliverable, namely a report on 25 years of adaptation under the UNFCCC. And I have to say that this has been a very, very useful guidebook for my work under the UNFCCC. This publication tells the riveting story of adaptation under the UNFCCC, taking us from the time back then when adaptation was seen as a dangerous distraction from the imperative to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, to the 25th anniversary of the UNFCCC, by which point a wide range of instruments, mechanisms, bodies, and processes have been put in place to support countries around the world in accelerating their adaptation actions. So this report is actually full of interesting facts. Did you know that the Nairobi Work Programme on Impacts, Vulnerability and Adaptation to Climate Change was actually the first stakeholder engagement mechanism created under the convention? Or did you know that the UNF Secretariat, on behalf of the Adaptation Committee, released a documentary on adaptation in 2014 that is available actually in 9 different languages? It's all in the report. And this
We'll just start. The COP President will make some opening remarks and then we'll open the floor for questions. Just as a note, we have a microphone, so if you raise your hand, someone will bring it to you. If I can ask, if you don't touch the microphone, we've got standing microphones, obviously, for COVID, so if I can ask you not to touch it when it's put in front of you. Thank you.
Great, well, thank you all for coming. And look, I'm very pleased to say that we're off to a good start at COP26. Leaders came armed with the ambition that they should rightly be showing, and of course the commitments we have seen so far are welcomed. It is clear there is no turning back. The world is firmly united in delivering a net zero resilient future. 90%, around 90% of the world's economy is now covered by a net zero target, and this compares to less than 30% when the UK took on COP26. And as I've said on many occasions, Paris promised, and therefore Glasgow must now deliver. And so we want at this COP to be able to say with credibility that we are limiting global temperature rises to well below 2 degrees, pursuing efforts to 1.5, and that means keeping 1.5 degrees within reach. And I want to be absolutely clear here, we are not deviating from the Paris Agreement pledge, but we are an unapologetically high ambition presidency. And yesterday we saw the start of that with commitments from countries across the world to halt deforestation, curb methane emissions, and ensure that finance is flowing to cleaner, more resilient infrastructure. And the most vulnerable countries are at the front and center of my mind. Today is Finance Day. Countries are setting the tone on ambition, and now, of course, the finance needs to follow. As I've said over the last couple of days, it is regrettable that we are highly unlikely to have met the $100 billion goal in 2020. But on the basis of information submitted by donors, the OECD analysis shows that developed countries will make significant progress towards the $100 billion goal in 2022, and I believe it also provides confidence that we will meet it in 2023. And over the 5-year period from 2021 to 2025, we will likely be above $500 billion in aggregate. And of course, whilst I'm here as COP President in a neutral role, I'm very pleased that the UK has doubled its climate finance commitment to £11.6 billion, and then yesterday announced a further £1 billion, taking our commitment to £12.6 billion. And it's encouraging that developed countries have stepped up over recent months, and indeed even recent days, in terms of finance, and I hope through negotiations and more broadly, we will be continuing to increase the focus on adaptation and access to finance, which matters a great deal to many of the most climate vulnerable countries. And I think today the force of the private sector is plain to see. And now, of course, the task is to ensure that finance flows to where it is needed most. I was also encouraged by yesterday's announcement of the South Africa Just Energy Transition Partnership. This is a sort of country partnership-led model that we need to see much more of in the coming years. And it is about making sure that countries are supported to shift to clean energy and that no one is left behind as we consign coal to the history books. Now, let me turn briefly to the negotiations. These, as you know, have started. I'm cautiously optimistic that we are making progress across a significant spectrum of issues. We have initial draft texts emerging across a range of the issues that are being discussed. And I have to say, I'm very pleased that the can-do attitude that's been shown by the leaders is so far being reflected in the negotiating rooms as well. We've also been consulting on the cover decision, where there is an opportunity to pick up on the call from world leaders for greater acceleration in climate action during this crucial decade. And this morning, heads of delegation had a productive discussion on this topic. On logistics, I also want to thank all the negotiators and the observers for bearing with us as we adjust to delivering an extraordinary COP in such extraordinary times. The daily testing regime is rigorous, but it is important, and it is there to protect us and also, very importantly, the people of Glasgow. And of course, the UNFCCC are adjusting and improving our processes every day, and we are committed to ensuring that we deliver an inclusive and transparent COP26. With that, I will pass to Patricia if she wants to make any opening remarks, and then we'll go to Q&A.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and let me just maybe highlight some of the announcements that have been made that I think are encouraging regarding the question of climate finance, and that I hope will allow us to make progress towards the ultimately objective, which is to move the billions to the trillions in order to be able to support the deep transformation of the world that is required. The co-president has already mentioned the announcement by the UK. Climate finance envoy Mark Carney said this morning in the speech he gave, make no mistake, the money is here if the world wants to use it.
He also said there is fuel for finance and finance to fuel the world's climate ambitions. I think those phrases very, very clearly express the situation. There is the money, we need to mobilize it for climate, we need to put it at the service of this, that is really achieving the transformation to address the biggest challenge for humanity. Some other announcements. For example, yesterday the United States joined Britain, France, Germany, and the European Union in a multi-billion-dollar partnership to support South Africa finance a quicker transition from coal. This initiative is valued at $8.5 billion overall. Japan and Australia have also announced commitments to double their adaptation finance, and commitments from Switzerland, the US, and Canada for the Adaptation Fund. New commitments have been made also by Spain, Ireland, Luxembourg. So I do hope that by the end of this conference we can really get to the goal of the 100 billion, not anymore in 2020 and 2021, but really hopefully in 2022. There was also a global forest finance pledge that was launched at this COP, including commitment by a group of developed countries to collectively provide 12 billion for forest-related climate finance between 2021 and 2025. Now, the important point is that all of this needs to be reflected in the outcomes from the conference. The conference needs to acknowledge, of course, these significant steps forward, but we also need to see there how we are getting to move from these announcements to the mobilization of the trillions that are required. The COP president has made a very broad presentation of the different groups that are already meeting. Let me also say on behalf of the Secretariat that we continue to work hard, closely with our UK counterparts in order to make things, especially the access to the venue, as high as possible. But I do want to ask you to bear with us for your understanding, because of the fact that we do need to have strict controls that allow us to take every possible measure to ensure the health and safety of all participants. Thank you, Mr. President.
Can we open the floor now for questions? Gentleman on the right here first, please.
Thank you very much. I'm Sebastian Montes from Forbes. My question regarding the emerging markets. How is going to be the finance for the emerging markets, and how are you planning to help countries such as Colombia and Latin America to ensure this transition to climate-friendly technologies in order to help them to ensure their climate safety, in order to taking into account that they are one of the most vulnerable continents in order to the climate consequences that can come in the future? Thank you.
Let me start on that. Well, obviously we've talked about where we are in terms of the $100 billion delivery plan. Clearly, countries that are eligible for that will be able to get support. I think there is a wider piece here as well about how do we support countries, for instance, with a clean energy transition. As you know, there was yesterday we launched together with Rockefeller a fund, £10 billion initially, building up to 100 billion by 2030, as part of supporting countries to make that clean energy transition. We started off Energy Transition Council as part of our COP26 work. That is going to continue for at least the next 5 years, and we will be working in partnership with that particular fund as well. And I think this goes to the heart of what Patricia and indeed world leaders have also talked about, is that the public finance is absolutely vital, and we need to make sure that that is delivered. But ultimately, this is also a case of ensuring that we are leveraging private finance as well to support the transformation we need to see around the world.
Lady in the green here.
Oh, I'm too short. Hi, Lisa Friedman from the New York Times. Thanks for doing this. 2 questions, if I could. One, I know you said bear with us about the logistical issues, but I hope you could address them a little more and what's going to be different. There's a lot of anger mounting outside the blue zone, people who can't get in, many more people accredited than capacity, wheelchair access, et cetera. I just spoke to a veteran of 15 COPs who said this is the worst organized he's ever seen. I hope you could speak to that. Secondly, on vulnerable countries have asked, the Vulnerable Country Forum have asked for countries to come back every year through 2025 to increase their targets to the 1.5 goal. Is that something that's under consideration in the actual negotiations? Thank you.
Great. Let me take those two, and then Patricia will want to come in perhaps on at least on the logistics one. Firstly, I think we all recognize, I think just the fact that we are sitting socially distanced, the fact that you're wearing face coverings, the fact that you're having to be daily tested, this is a unique COP in quite extraordinary times. And I can tell you that the feedback I have had personally from ministers and negotiators is that they do think that what the UK, together with the Secretariat, the UNFCCC have done is something really quite positive, that we have managed to organize this event in these COVID times. Nevertheless, of course, we regret any logistical issues that people feel are stopping them coming in a timely manner, and we are working to fix those. Clearly, on the first 2 days of COP, when the world leaders have been here, there has been particular pressure on the number of people coming to the venue. We've seen some of that today, but I hope that will settle over the next few days. But Patricia may want to talk in some detail to what we have done logistically today with the Secretariat to make it easier and quicker for people to get in. On your second point, in terms of keeping 1.5 within reach, obviously that is something that a goal that I think just about every world leader has amplified over the last couple of days, and that is going to have to be reflected in the negotiations. Now, all of this is going to have to emerge through consensus, but there is a very clear ask, I think, from world leaders that we consider this as part of any decisions that are made here at the COP. Patricia.
Yes. Thank you, Alok. And well, as the President is saying, really the fact that we are operating in COVID context has completely changed the way that we can put the premises at your disposal. Look at this room. Normally we would have at least twice as much as the capacity that we have right now. We are used to having also rooms packed with people that are standing if there is not enough seats. So that's not possible. That's not possible because the responsible thing to do and what is being done in every country in the world is really to look at what are the measures that need to be taken in order to prevent. So this is really, and I kindly ask you to take this into
easy. Climate action is a large and complex challenge, and one meeting, so whether it's the G20 or indeed a COP, isn't going to be able to address everything. But countries are clear-sighted on the urgency of the science, and the need to accelerate action this decade is firmly on the agenda for leaders and negotiators here in Glasgow. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hand over to the Executive Secretary, please.
Thank you very much. And I will not repeat what has been so well said by the COP President. Let me start by expressing on behalf of UN Climate Change Secretariat, but I believe also on behalf of the wider membership of the Conference of the Parties, our deep gratitude for the incredible work that the UK government has deployed in order to allow us to be here meeting today in person. This is really the first big UN gathering after the pandemic started. So it is really significant. And in this regard, I also want to thank all of you for being here. I am conscious that for you, it was also not easy to travel here and to go through all the different processes that are needed in order to ensure that we have a safe and healthy environment for us all. So thank you for being here, and thank you for your continuous interest in allowing us to spread the word of what we are doing here. I want also to mention this morning the Minister of Environment of Chile. She made her statement, her final statement, handing over the presidency to President Alok Sharma. So it was also a very important and I would say also maybe an emotional moment. She has held the longest presidency ever in our process for very specific circumstances. So we are here, yes, in a very crucial moment. We have different signals. On the one side, the presence here of 120 leaders, it just indicates how much the issue of climate change is really at the top of the priority at the highest level. So that is, I would say, reassuring. That's really important that we register that. On the other hand,